So I just watched True Romance. So for those of you at home who don't know what True Romance is, this movie follows a pop culture junkie, I would say, and he marries a girl, and the girl is a prostitute, and from then on he steals cocaine from her pimp, tries to sell it in Hollywood, so it's a bit of a road trip movie. And meanwhile, while all this is happening, the owners of the cocaine, the mob, the cops, everyone's trying to track them down as they're on the run. This movie stars an all-star cast, I would say. Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Christian Slater is the lead here. Patricia Arquette as well is the female lead. You get other actors showing up in here. Some have very minor roles, but big actors nonetheless. So you have people like Samuel L. Jackson showing up here. Brad Pitt shows up. James Gandolfini is in this movie as well. So you can see that there's an all-star cast. And Gary Oldman is the character that most people remember from this movie. List keeps going on and on and on. Christopher Walken is in this movie. So really good cast, I would say. This movie is directed by Tony Scott, who directed Top Gun. And it has a lot of that Tony Scott style in there, that kind of 80s cheese style. But more significant than the fact that it is directed by Tony Scott is the fact that it is written by Quentin Tarantino. For those of you who don't know the story behind this movie, back when Tarantino was starting his career, he had 3 screenplays. He had True Romance, Reservoir Dogs, and Natural Born Killers. Of those 3, he only had the budget to direct one, which was Reservoir Dogs. From then on, he sold True Romance to Tony Scott, and he sold Natural Born Killers, which would later be directed by Oliver Stone. But he has since disowned that movie because he said that it is so far from what he originally wrote that there's no resemblance. However, Tarantino in interviews has expressed that he still has respect for True Romance. So while he doesn't really respect what they did with Natural Born Killers, he does still respect True Romance. I, for one, like both movies. I'm just trying to give you the background here. But this movie is really, really fun. Now, when you compare it to other movies Tarantino was doing at the time, I think this one fails in comparison. I think Reservoir Dogs is a better movie. I think Pulp Fiction is a better movie. And I even think Jackie Brown, I'm one of those people who think Jackie Brown is really underrated. If you couldn't tell from the poster of Pam Grier behind me, I think all 3 of his movies are better than True Romance. The things that work in True Romance are the things you can tell is just Tarantino-like dialogue, and even the moments where you can feel Tony Scott's feel in there. It's just narratively, you could tell this is probably one of Tarantino's first movies. Narratively, the structure is a little loose, in my opinion. So I'm going to start with just listing off all the positives in this movie. Just like other Tarantino projects, so many flamboyant characters in this movie. The one who steals the show, the one everyone remembers here, is Gary Oldman, who is unrecognizable as Patricia Arquette's pimp, so Alabama's pimp. He's so unrecognizable in this, and it's not just the makeup they do for him. His accent in this movie is such like something you wouldn't expect from Gary Oldman.
You have a seat, boy. You have your sofa egg roll. We got everything here from a little I Joe to damn if I know.
People think of Gary Oldman as a very prompt British actor who was in movies like The Darkest Hour and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He wasn't like that back in the 90s. In the 90s, he was a little more crazy. He was doing stuff like Leon the Professional, this movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Credit where credit's due, Gary Oldman is a very versatile actor that people tend to forget that nowadays, but he steals the show in this movie. Other performances that stood out, I think Patricia Arquette is the heart of this movie. She's a ditzy girl, she's my kind of girl, but she's not too incompetent. I thought she was the most developed and most interesting character in this movie. One thing I'll say, I'm going to go on a huge tangent here, so bear with me, but in recent years there's been a lot of controversy around hitting women in movies. So people complain, whenever a woman gets hit in movies. So if you guys remember, there was a controversy revolving around the movie X-Men Apocalypse. They had a poster of the film where Jennifer Lawrence's character was getting strangled by Apocalypse. And in Suicide Squad, there was a controversial scene where Batman struck Harley Quinn in the face. And more recently, in the recent Star Wars movies, fans tend to complain that Rey doesn't get her ass kicked enough. And the counter argument to that is, like, people say they don't want to show any weakness to these female characters and stuff like that, so it's a whole argument back and forth. I'm gonna show one scene here, and I'm just gonna play the scene and I'll get back to it. So, watch the scene.
Now, where's my Coke? Turn around. Turn around. Answer me! Come on. You got a lot of heart, kid.
Alright, and we're back. So when an average viewer sees that scene, they're like, Rosanna Arquette got her ass whipped. But when I see that scene, I'm like, Rosanna Arquette is a very strong female character. Because even though she does get physically abused by James Gandolfini, which, look, she's a woman and he's a big, tough gangster, of course he's gonna easily knock her out and punch her in the face. It's just anatomy, I guess. But she wins when it comes to the mental war there. Look, there's a reason why I have Pam Grier behind me. When it comes to portraying that kind of strong female character, you look at Pam Grier's old movies like Foxy Brown. She would never win in a fist fight with a man. I'm not saying it can't happen, but that wasn't the reason why Pam Grier was a strong female character in those movies. She would outwit people. She would do clever things. And she was ultimately mentally stronger than the men. And I feel like people get so caught up by the physical action in a film that they forget to look at the subtext that's behind that action. So in my opinion, this is a perfect example here of how Rosanna Arquette is a strong female character, despite not necessarily winning the fight when it comes to physical action. Tangent over. I just saw that scene in the movie and I was like, wow, that would be a very controversial scene nowadays. But it makes sense when you look at it the way I look at that scene. So getting back to the movie, the scene everyone remembers from this movie as well is the scene with Christopher Walken as he's interviewing Dennis Hopper's character.
Your part, eggplant.
And it's a nice little humorous scene there. And I think that's Tarantino writing dialogue at his finest. You can tell that's dialogue written by Quentin Tarantino. It's really, really well done. It's really on point. The characters go back and forth on one another. And all of a sudden, boom, flip of a dime, shit goes haywire. It's a great scene. I wish there was more Christopher Walken in this movie. I feel like they kind of forgot. That's basically the only scene that has Christopher Walken. They kind of forget his character after that. And that's what I mean by the narrative is a little too loose. When you look at a movie like Reservoir Dogs, there are creative liberties when it comes to the conventions of storytelling there. The story is told non-chronologically. Same thing can be said for Pulp Fiction. But here, it doesn't embrace the fact that it's going against convention enough. So it just ends up kind of missing a bit. But this is Tarantino experimenting. And speaking of Tarantino experimenting, there's some of these scenes with the dialogue that isn't necessarily that good in my opinion. While I did like that Sicilian scene, scenes where where Christian Slater's character talks about kung fu movies, all I hear in my head is Tarantino dialogue. Like, this is actual Quentin Tarantino talking, not a character in a Quentin Tarantino movie. So look, for those reasons, I don't think True Romance works as much as Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown. It is still a good movie, though, and it's a lot of fun. And listen, when it comes to romantic films, if you want one that the guy will like and the girl will like, I feel like this one hits both demographics. Christian Slater's a lovable dude. He's charming. Rosanna Arquette in this movie is really fun. She's very witty, very ditzy, but the good kind of ditzy. And they have so much chemistry. And that's a thing I wish they leaned more into. The whole movie kind of has a Bonnie and Clyde feel. And it's almost like the romance between the two leads is kind of forgotten halfway through the movie. And I wanted it to be more consistent throughout the movie because the ending payoff would have paid off more had I been more invested in their romance. But the dialogue between the two characters was very good dialogue, and I bought them as a couple, and I could see why they would fall in love with one another. And the whole beginning where Rosanna Arquette's like, I don't think he'll like me because I'm basically a whore. I was set up. I was like a gift for his birthday, whatever. I thought that was a very punching scene, like how Rosanna Arquette was like not confident and she's breaking down into tears. She's a very talented actress, and I think she doesn't get the attention she deserves despite being an Oscar winner. Brad Pitt also is in this movie, but he wasn't really well known at the time. But he plays like a stoner who just like gets stoned on a couch, which was probably the easiest check Brad Pitt ever had to claim in his life. Yeah, True Romance, good example of how you write strong female characters, and that's a reoccurring thing in Tarantino movies. Tarantino knows how to write women, which is ironic because he's like a dude. Like a creepy dude who likes feet nonetheless. But yeah, he's really good at that aspect, I would say. And one other thing I noticed is that Tarantino's really good at writing romance. You look at the romance in Jackie Brown between Pam Grier and Robert Forster. That was a very convincing, very organic, very well done romance. And you look at the romance in even Django Unchained between Kerry Washington and Jamie Foxx. I thought that was a really well made romance as well. They had some great scenes with one another, and I can understand why they're in love with one another. Tarantino could probably do a really good romantic film, just straight up romance film. And he has expressed love for the rom-com genre, so who knows, will that be Tarantino's 10th film? I don't really think so. Totally aside, I don't want Tarantino to do a Star Trek movie. I just want Tarantino to do whatever fucked up shit is in his brain, to be honest. I don't want him to work on previous IPs, but yeah. Putting this on the love meter. I'm done going on tangents here, it's getting late. But putting this on the love meter, let me just have a sip of my brewski. It's a 7 on the love meter. Very, very good movie. Very fun. Girls will like this movie for the romance. Guys will like this movie for the action, the crime element to it. But ultimately, both parties will like it because it's just a well-made film. Very solid. Solid directing by Tony Scott. One more thing, the music in this film, the main theme by Hans Zimmer, that's a very iconic song and it really fits this movie. And yeah, if you haven't seen True Romance and you're a Tarantino fan, I suggest you watch it.
True Romance.